A lot of guys, myself included, when they were younger, they saw the pretty thing and like, I need to have that one. We pursue the women right out of our lives. The best strategies that I've developed later on in life is basically just catch and release. Catch and release, which is kind of, it's fun for me. I like to do that anyway. And then every once in a while, one of the fishes will jump back into my boat. That fish like really wants to be caught. And then I'll, maybe throw it back a couple more times. The woman who has to work for the relationship, who keeps jumping back into the boat, is not going to throw it away for a trifle. She's going to feel fortunate that she's there. She's going to be making an effort, and she is going to be more committed to the relationship than a woman who was won.
Dr. Taraban is an expert in relationships and personal development. Orion Taraban, Psych D, has helped thousands of people get what they want in life. His podcast, Psych Hacks, has over 80 million views on YouTube. You have over 500,000 subscribers, don't you? I just saw that the other day. And I think that probably really jumped after you interviewed me, didn't it? It really, took a bullet, right, to the top. It's established him as a thought leader in popular psychology. His first book, The Value of Others. How long's the book been out now?
For about a month. Very excited.
About a month. We're going to dive into it too. It's been out about a month. Examines relationships through the lens of behavioral economics. I promise you, reading the first chapter of this book is like reading a graduate school economic textbook, except it's about sex and boobs and stuff like that. Then it gets to be about ships and captains and passengers. It reveals the often counterintuitive realities that govern the sexual marketplace. Dr. Taraban is a licensed psychologist and currently lives in Napa, California. Orion, thanks for coming and hanging out with us. It's good to have you here, and I'm so excited that your book is out. Just because, as I said, moving you into this date and time slot meant moving you up several weeks. So I dove into your book this week, and I have to admit, I'm about quarter of a third into it. I have to go back and look at my Kindle. I'm loving it. It's engaging. It's intriguing. It's challenging. Yeah, I'm looking forward to diving into it. I'll probably ask you some dumb questions that if I just have read more of the book, I might already know the answers. But anyways, good questions to ask because, I don't know how many people have heard your podcast or read your book since it is pretty new. Probably a lot of the people here haven't had a chance. I was talking to someone the other day who said they'd read it, so I'm excited about that. So tell us a little bit about you. Why'd you become a psychologist? Tell us about your specialty in psychology, and maybe tell us a little bit about your podcast. So 3 questions all in one.
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying thank you for having me on, Robert. It's an honor to be here. I've been an admirer of your work for quite some time, and it was great to have you on my podcast. And I was intrigued to see your community from behind the scenes. So it's been very wonderful so far. So thank you so much for having me on. Let's see if I remember. So the first question is why I became a psychologist. That's kind of a complicated one, but I knew that it was going to be a good fit for me professionally. Before this, I was an actor and a teacher, and I learned a lot of skills in those 2 professions that have helped me to be a therapist and a clinician. Really, I like working one-on-one with people. I like really dealing with meaningful, difficult problems. I like novelty. I like freedom and flexibility. I wanted to make a certain amount of money. All of those things kind of converged, and psychology seemed to be a good possibility. I had been in therapy myself. I knew how beneficial it could be, as it did significantly improve the quality of my life. And I wanted to be able to bring that to other people. I guess that's the full and complete answer. Part of it was obviously self-interest. Part of it was, I think, a good fit between my skills and the marketplace. And here we are.
There's that marketplace. We're going to talk about marketplace. And we're going to talk about money too, because you do mention money quite a bit in the book. And I want to dive into that some as well. So what would you say your specialty is in terms of your practice? Who do you like working with? What are you really good at?
Well, I like working with pretty much everybody. It's very rare that I don't like one of my clients. And when that does happen, I think it's happened once or twice, I just can't work with that person. So I think I have a pretty high success rate. I think it's part of my job is to find the likable thing in every person that I talk to. And that helps me to be authentically engaged with that individual. But for a long time, my private practice focused on men's mental health, and all of my patients were men. This was both because of my personal interests and marketplace dynamics as well. In the Bay Area, which has, I think, over 3 or 4 million people, there's probably 2 or 3 therapists who specialize in men's mental health. And
Really?
this is in a part of the world where you can't swing a dead cat without hitting some kind of clinician or therapist or practitioner. It's a huge market that is not being tapped into, and there's clearly demand for it. There's a lot of men who are mistrustful of therapy, I think, for a number of good reasons. And I think that they are desperate to be heard and to be respected for their unique experiences. And I think they are despairing of that in traditional mainstream psychology these days. I also really like working with men. We can be much more problem and solution focused. I can be way more direct. I can be assertive in a way that we can just sort of like focus on what to do as opposed to a lot of emotional processing. I'm not really a touchy-feely guy. So I think of it more like therapeutic coaching, the work that I do with a lot
Yeah.
of my guys, where we define the problem, we have actionable solutions, they go off, and then we troubleshoot after they've moved the ball down the field a little bit.
I can relate to all of that. My doctorate's in marriage and family therapy, so I started out doing a lot of couples work, some family work, individual, of course. And then as I worked on me in therapy and started recognizing men coming to me for therapy with the same issues I had, i.e., I'm a nice guy. Why isn't that working? And as I wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy over a period of 5, 6, 7 years, my practice, while I was still in private practice up in Seattle, went in the direction of being all men. And like you, I love working with men. And I often use the phrase, I can take the big stick out with the guys. I can hit them upside the head. And they go, thank you. Nobody's ever done that with love before. And I really like that dynamic of working with men. And it's interesting in the Bay Area that there's only 3 of you, because I kind of see the Bay Area as kind of a hotspot of men's work, especially kind of like consciousness men's work. And so that kind of surprises me that there's not more therapists, maybe a lot of coaches, but not as many therapists specializing with men.
Well, I think
And
in the Bay Area, transpersonal psychology and things of that sort are becoming more popular and ascendant. So it's like going beyond the gendered expression of consciousness, which there might be some truth to that.
yeah, there might be. And as you were talking, I read an article last night in the Seattle newspaper. I live in Puerto Vallarta, but I still have connections with where I grew up. And it was talking about a running club for Black men. They get together every Sunday, go for a 4-mile run in a park there, because they basically say it's dangerous for a Black man to go running on a city street. And, things that Black men have to deal with that's not even in my consciousness as a white guy. And they get together and said, but also to work on just their health, their wellness, their psychological well-being, to have a connection with men. And I really enjoyed reading that article, because as you say, we men really need that depth of connection, and we need that ability I think to go deep with other men. So I'm a big fan of doing this kind of men's work. So what made you decide to write a book? What made you decide to write a book that takes an economic view of relationships?
Mm. Well, I was very much dissatisfied with the state of a lot of dating and relationship advice. I think that a lot of it is bullshit. A lot of it is wishful thinking. A lot of it is vibes and new agey stuff or pseudo psychology, like the overextension of attachment styles or Myers-Briggs and things like that. And even the good folks seem to be getting it only half right. So the primary thesis of the book is basically that everybody in the sexual marketplace is trying to secure a relationship with their perceived best option. And I think that's a fairly timid assertion. Like, I think it's pretty tough to disagree with that. But if that's true, it means that there's 2 components to all parts of sexual relationship selection, maintenance, negotiation, which is perception, because it's perceived best value, and value, which is an economic concept. And I think you need both to really understand who ends up with who and why. You need to understand that a lot of this value is in the eye of the observer,
Mm.
but we also have to understand that relationships are subject to competition. They are subject to larger market forces. And if you just focus on like the internal psychological stuff and you miss out on the economic transactional portion of relationships
Now, when you say
and vice
economics,
versa.
we're not just talking dollars and cents, correct? Well, why don't you actually define what is the sexual marketplace?
Okay, sure. Yeah. When I say economics, obviously the primary association with that is money.
Right.
In one of my footnotes, I think I define that, or I offer a definition from the von Mises Institute, a very famous economist in the Austrian School of Economics. And he basically says that economics is the science of studying how people use limited means to secure definite ends that could be deployed in other ways. So another way of thinking about it is economics is the science of like studying decision making. Why do people do the things that they do? They have limited time, they have limited energy, they have limited money, they have limited bandwidth. So why do they deploy it in this direction and not in that direction? There
Right.
has to be some reason for that. And often the reasons that people are conscious of aren't really borne out when we examine the behavior on a population or statistical level. So people can not be very insightful into their own decision-making capacities.
And I'm thinking, no shit.
Yeah, no kidding, right? So that's what I mean by economics. And when I talk about the sexual marketplace, I think the sexual marketplace is it's not like a physical location. It's not a meat market or a dating app. It's
Well,
really
it's
everywhere.
not there. It's not there on my phone.
It
It's
can be
everywhere,
there.
right?
It's just not
Yeah.
only there. It
Yeah.
appears wherever there's the possibility of a sexual relationship being transacted, which is almost all the time, which is one of the things that makes people uncomfortable about the sexual marketplace, because it's kind of like the Wild West. Like every day, people enter into sexual relationships with each other, despite the legal, the ethical, the moral, the social prohibitions and censures about doing so. Like just because you're in a relationship, just because you're married, doesn't necessarily mean that you or your partner are outside of the sexual marketplace permanently. Like it can always be reopened. And I think that's sort of like the all's fair in love and war kind of a thing. We have rules about the sexual marketplace, but we don't, it's very hard to enforce them because it is kind of like the Wild West, given that the sexual marketplace is connected to life in the sense of sex creates more people, and nature like just doesn't really completely submit to civilized impulses. It's like it will never be tamed for good and all because it's
Right.
connected to like the raw libidinal force of nature.
Well, I've always said that Mother Nature loves lots of penises and lots of vaginas, and that even that sexual monogamy is evolutionary sin because it's just not the way Mother Nature works, or at least her preferences don't seem to be that way. Even as hard as we try to make some of these, you know, imposed limits work. Now, when you talk about the sexual marketplace, I mentioned penis and vaginas, and I think that's probably how most of us would probably think of, quote, the sexual marketplace. That every interaction we have with another person is, are we going to put our penis in their vagina? Or are they going to let us, you know? But I'm assuming that the sexual marketplace probably has a lot more nuances than just that. Because, you know, guys especially tend to say, well, I didn't have sex with that woman. You know, our former president, I didn't have sex with that woman. Yeah, but, you know, she gave him a blowjob and he came on her dress. I put that in the category of sex.
Yeah, me too.
So, yeah. And so I think I've always defined sex when I'm talking to men as anything you wouldn't do with your sister. And so I think guys, because we are so black and white about stuff, when you talk about a sexual marketplace, and of course, probably the evolutionary bottom drive of it is penis and vaginas, but it takes a lot of other forms, doesn't it? A lot of other manifestations. People get needs met that are sexual without the actual consummation of an insertion of parts and parts. Would you say that's accurate?
Oh, sure. Just thinking that sex is penetrative intercourse is wrong. There's
Yeah.
all kinds of sexual acts, and it doesn't always have to be between a man and a woman. Like I focus on heterosexual relationships in the book, but like a lot of what I say applies to gay and lesbian and non-conforming relationships as well. So, yeah, I think that the definition of anything you wouldn't do with your sisters is not bad. I like that one.
You can
And
use it
there's
if you want.
a great deal of like one of the primary theses of the book is that people attempt to exchange unequal goods of comparable value. And in general, men go to the sexual marketplace to exchange resources for sex, and women attempt to use their sexual opportunity to secure resources. And resources can be very, very broad. It could be money, but it could also be security and commitment. It could be excitement or the alleviation of boredom. It could be instrumental support, a ride to the airport. It could mean a way of revenge or navigating in a
No,
social hierarchy.
no. Tell me that doesn't happen in the sexual
Of
marketplace.
course it does. I mean, people use sex for all kinds of different reasons, right? To think that it's just about pleasure and babies is a little naive.
Right. So let me ask you a question. This is just kind of a fun guy to guy question. Have you ever been accused of overcomplicating things? Anybody
Of
ever?
course.
Yeah, of course. Because I'm reading the book, and it is. People, I got to tell you, it is very well written. When you were reading the book, it's obvious how intelligent Dr. Taraban is, and how well studied. You can tell he studied economics. There's even a math equation in there describing this economic exchange in relationships. You can tell he studied, social biology, evolutionary psychology, relationships. He uses words like heuristics, tautology, and retconning. I'm probably saying that wrong. I had to look that word up.
Yeah,
I've
that's a
never,
new one.
yeah, when I was writing No More Mr. Nice Guy, if I came across a word I really liked, I tried to find a way and one word I was ubiquitous. And you use that word in your book as well, or one form of that word. So I read, like I said, over a quarter of the book. First chapter, like I said, it's almost like an graduate school economic textbook. Second chapter of the book is this expanded, I don't know if it's illustration,
Metaphor, analogy.
metaphor, analogy. I was trying to figure of ships, captains, and passengers. I mean, a long, long chapter, this allegorical chapter. And then I finally get to the point that says, basically, men are attracted to young women with big boobs, and women are Barbie, and women are attracted to men with, resources to make their life better. Again, I'm going, you could have just said that in the very first paragraph of the book
I
and
know.
skipped, those other. So but you, even as you don't really make it complicated, because even as I read, and fairly, terms that we don't normally use in our everyday vocabulary, you do actually, though, present stuff in such a well laid out logical progression, and explaining even caveats and exceptions and things like that, that it is so well done. So I want to ask you a few more to define a few more things as just a way of kind of teeing up things that you teach in the book. And because of, you and I have maybe about 10 more minutes before I turn this over and let people ask you questions, I kind of want to explore even a few of the principles, especially the one around players and gold diggers. I really liked that part. Okay, just define a relationship for us. What's a relationship?
To me, a relationship exists when people exchange value. I think that's the necessary and sufficient condition. If you're not exchanging things that you value with somebody else, you're not in a relationship with them. And if you do that, you are. And so I had to define that because people talk about relationships and no one really knows what the fuck they're talking about. People can actually be having sex with each other repeatedly over months or years and not be in a relationship, or think that they're not in a relationship, And that's very confusing because we're playing with words and we're playing with terms and definitions. So that, for me, is necessary and sufficient, the exchange of value. People do not move towards people they want nothing from. And if you don't give or take, then there's like nothing we can do. If you had come to me, Robert, and said, "Hey, Orion, we'd love to have you on your podcast," and I say, "Okay, well, what's in it for me?" Well, you have and we can't figure out a way to like make it work. We're eventually going to say, "Hey, I guess we're not going to be able to do anything."
Yeah.
It seems pretty obvious to me. Like there has to be some sort of like, okay, I'm going to have this guy on, and it's going to be an opportunity for me, and like, oh, okay, now we can move forward and transact with each other.
Yeah, we're both opportunist motherfuckers. We know this is going to help both of us. It's going to help you, going to help me. Nothing
What's
wrong
really
with that.
interesting is one of the reasons, this is going to be a tangent, but one of the reasons I started PsycHacks was I was kind of lonely, to be honest. I started it during COVID, and I had to close my offices. I couldn't teach my classes. My family was very concerned about the virus and they wouldn't see me. My friends often wouldn't see me. So suddenly I went from being surrounded by people to having almost nobody that I was interacting with. So I started the podcast as a way of kind of throwing out a line to the wider world because I felt like there would be people who resonated with what I had to say out there somewhere. And I just had to like throw up a line and have them recognize and find me. And one of the great things that has come with the podcast success is that I get to talk to people like you and all kinds of other folks. Now, we might have been intellectually aligned on a lot of issues, Robert, but if I was just some random, even therapist in the Bay Area, like, why would you have me on? Why would you have a conversation with me? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like one of the secrets, I think, to male friendships, especially as you get older in life, is you hide them behind a value proposition. Because I built something that is interesting to other people, and I can now be of value to other men that I might be interested in and respect, we now have the basis of relating with one another. And even though it might start as a conversation or an interview or even like some sort of business arrangement, that's the entree into a potentially a more social relationship as well. Like I would not have access to you, I would think, on this level anyway, if I didn't have a channel with 500,000 subscribers.
You're
So
right.
it's like sometimes guys have to write their own invitation and it can take longer than you expect. But once you have something of value to other men, you can enter into relationships with them, and not just business relationships, but it's like, because we're doing this, we're actually going to have an authentic, I hope, emotional connection. We're getting to know each other a little bit better. Who knows where this is going to lead in the future?
And even like, for example, when I found out from Chuck that you and Chuck and somebody else that I know, two other people that I like a lot, Dr. Sean T. Smith and Ken, you guys all get together. And I'm going,
We
what the
do.
fuck? I want to be in that group. Those are all cool people. I like all those people. I want to hang out with them too. And I hear exactly what you're saying, because even though Integration Nation is a company that I started and to build community for men, I promise you, it fills my bucket too. When I get to go be on these calls with other men and see their enthusiasm and have connections and work with my coaches, it fills my bucket. So there is an exchange of value there as well. So I like that we're actually, talking about this economic exchange, even outside of, putting body parts in body parts. It really affects every relationship dynamic. And you even make a point that it has to be reciprocal by nature, that just one person giving somebody else stuff is not a relationship. Did I
No,
get that
because
right?
if it were, then we'd have to assume that just one person taking from another person is a relationship. That would be problematic. You know, you wouldn't say that you're in a relationship with your mugger, or that a idol is in a relationship with one of her anonymous fans that she's never even met. It's just like it's going one way. That's not a
Taylor
relationship.
Swift is not chip with all of her thousands, hundreds of thousands of Swifties. Oh no, I'm
No.
disillusioned. I'm disillusioned.
But this
Okay.
is also, I think, part of why men tend to struggle with their male friendships, especially as they age. It's not like they don't value their friends anymore. It's not like they have falling outs, though I suppose that can happen. It's just that they become like the eighth most important thing in their life. Like
Yeah.
to my male friends, I don't give them money. They don't get laid with me. You know, they don't take care of their kids
Well,
and
fuck
provide
that. I'm not
childcare.
joining that group with you guys after all. You just
I guess the
took
point
that
is,
off
it's
the
like
table.
there's nothing. They don't have anything against me, but it's like they have bills to pay. They have their wives. They have their children. They have to take care of their self and their fitness. So like they squeeze me in once in a blue moon because I'm just not providing sufficient value given their goals at this stage of their life. But
Yeah.
that's can be very dangerous, especially if the marriage falls apart.
No, and often they do fall apart because the
They
guys
do.
have neglected those things. So, Orion, we could have a very good friendship. I promise you. Let's start negotiating. We'll move forward with that. Well, let me ask you a few other definitions, and then I want to talk about just a couple of concepts, and then I do want to take time to open this up. What is the difference between a normalized sexual marketplace value and a perceived sexual marketplace value?
That's me overcomplicating things again. So
I
part
know,
of what,
but you do give it letters. You break it down with small
sure,
letter and capital letters. So,
makes
you
it
do a
sound
good
more
job
official
of
that
it.
way.
Yeah.
So to answer the question about why I overcome, so part of this is I wanted to resolve some longstanding arguments, or at least attempt to resolve some longstanding arguments in the space about sexual marketplace value and even what a high value person is. Like, that's why the first chapter is so complicated. I realized that if I was going to write a book about value and being a high value man, I better fucking be prepared to define what value is. And it turns out that that's actually extremely hard to do. It's a
Yeah.
shame that the first chapter had to be the most complicated. I even in a footnote say that if this is getting too much, just skip ahead and you know, it'll be totally fine.
Well,
But
you do that with covert calculator, which I want to ask you about that as well. So I
sure.
do want to get to that one.
So people have all these kinds of arguments, for example, about what a high value man is. And when
Right.
people come out in the space and say a high value man has a six pack and he makes six figures a year, and it's like he's 6'2", you're going to have some woman out there who's going to say, oh, you know, height and money don't matter to me. This is ridiculous. And part of that might be socially desirable responding. She could be saying what she needs to say to manage perception in that social space. She may not be insightful into her own selection process, but she may, at least on some points, be telling the truth. Like, obviously, men who are shorter than 6'2" still get laid and have satisfying relationships. When we assume that's because the women that they're with find them very, or at least sufficiently attractive. So the problem with defining value with static qualities is that there's always going to be exceptions to
Yeah.
that rule at the individual level. Now, we can say that in general, all of the things being equal, if we had two exact same candidates and this guy made $1 million a year and this guy made, you know, 10,000, why not choose the millionaire? You know, if everything else were the same. So we know also on the population level that certain traits or attributes are more attractive to men and to women, but there's always individual exceptions. So that's why I also started talking about the different forms of sexual marketplace value, right? So normalized sexual marketplace value is generally what we mean when we talk about that in the space. It's like when I say high
The
value
six pack
man,
as alpha, that stereotypical alpha
totally.
male.
Yeah. Like it being a movie star, a professional athlete, you're very rich, you're very famous, you're good looking, you're tall, you know, it's like Bruce Wayne
You drive a
or
Camaro. I'm showing my age. Back in the day, if you drove a Camaro in high school, I mean, you got laid.
sure, that's great, man. I don't think having a car ever got me laid, but you know, maybe different
I didn't
times.
have a Camaro, and I didn't. So that
Oh,
was my
that's
excuse.
why if you had the
I
Camaro,
did not have a Camaro. I had a Dodge Dart.
got it. Yeah, I didn't have a car that I think aroused much desire in women when I was a teenager. So normalized sexual marketplace value is the degree to which some individual conforms with like what our culture says is an attractive man or attractive woman. But obviously, individual tastes and preferences differ significantly from that archetype. Like for me, I know that I'm supposed to find like the tall, skinny, lanky supermodels attractive. And on some level they are, but they're really not my type. Now you could say that's maybe defensive because I probably couldn't get them anyway. And so it's sort of like sour grapes. That's a possibility here. But I like a different phenotype. You know, I like shorter girls. I don't like the angular features. I like them to be kind of softer faced. Um, and I don't think I'm lying to myself. And but my culture would say that the type of woman that I might be attracted to isn't a 9 or a 10, but she could be a 9 or a 10 to me. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And that's ultimately what matters is how attractive you are in the eyes of the person perceiving you. And that's why I say it's perceived sexual marketplace value. And that's why I think it's also important for guys to shoot their shot because you can't really assume what's going on inside of another person's mind. You could differ significantly from what society tells you is archetypally attractive, and you could still be very attractive to certain individuals.
Yeah. I've been with women who I thought why'd this woman pick me? In my classification, she was out of my league, and they would pick me and they would tell me things. Oh, I loved your hands, or I love your kind eyes, or I love your kissable lips, or I love your bald head. And I'm going, come on, attraction's got to go deeper than just that. But that's what they told themselves, and I go, well,
Hands
who
are
am I to,
big. And the baldness is interesting. I just did a
my
consultation with
hands
a
are
guy.
proportional. I think that's the piece they like. They're very proportional.
Proportionality and symmetry, very important in
Yeah.
general. I did a consultation with a guy yesterday. He's a younger man, and he's gone bald, and he's feeling very insecure about that. And he was despairing that sometimes he's having a conversation with the woman. It seems to be going well. And then he takes off his baseball cap. She sees that he has no hair, and like all the air goes out of the room and the
Yeah.
vibe changes. And I said, you know what? I believe that happens. And you're not making stuff up. Some women are just not going to be into bald guys. But I guarantee that there's going to be some women out there who are really fucking into bald guys. Like they love it. It turns them on.
Yeah.
So like any idiosyncrasy, any deviation from the normalized sexual marketplace archetype, some people are going to be, it's going to give some women the ick. They're going to be disgusted by it. But there's going to be also a subset of women who find that to be really attractive, and sometimes in a way that they can't even explain. It's like a food. Every food has people who think it's disgusting and people who love it, and it's like an acquired taste. And the kind of more unusual the food is, the more people either really hate it or really love it.
So having unusual traits can be a very positive with a certain subset of people.
Absolutely. And in fact, I think it's generally in men's best interest to try to be more attractive to fewer women. Like if you can be very, very attractive to just 0.1% of women, that's going to be more women than you're ever going to fucking be able to deal with in your entire life.
Yeah, that's
So
plenty.
it's a lot of women. That's going to be a second job for sure.
All right. This is the hardest part of my job is I have so many things. This could be a 90-minute chat, you and I, because I got so many things I want to ask, but I want to give guys time. But I, there's so many other questions I'm going to have to skip over. But I'm going to read something. He says, women don't like players because the latter are fundamentally hustlers. They succeed in transacting something for nothing. This causes women to feel cheated by the exchange, even though they were, in most cases, enthusiastic and consenting participants. A little bit later, men don't like gold diggers because the latter are fundamentally hustlers. They succeed in transacting something for nothing. This causes men to feel cheated by the exchange, even though they were, in most cases, enthusiastic and consenting participants. Now, reading this, it got my attention because you say, you really do stress that men have this great disgust for gold diggers, and women have this seemingly disgust for players. But women fuck players all the time, and men give money to gold diggers all the time.
Yeah.
So is there maybe even a certain value we get? Because every woman that ever called me a player, and there's a few, all had sex with me in a very, very, very short amount of time after calling me a player. So apparently that wasn't such a terrible thing. So how do we explain this thing that we're active participants in this thing that we find or we claim to be disgusting?
Oh, yeah. Well, that can change depending on where you are in the transaction of the relationship, right?
It changes from moment to moment to moment, right?
Exactly. And I do believe that the women who get with players do get something, and the men who get with gold diggers do get something. The cheating is that they feel like they've given more and gotten less. So it's not so much that they've gotten nothing, though I do use that word in the quote that you used, but that they kind of got ripped off, like they overpaid significantly. And I think it is interesting that I've never heard a man, either professionally or personally, complain to me, Orion, I just hate it when a woman uses me for sex. Like she just wants my body. And I find that so disrespectful and
I
dehumanizing.
smiled when I read that because I actually have had that happen.
You've had that?
She just
Wow.
fucking me and that's it. That's all she wants. She just wants to fuck me.
Okay.
But believe me,
I've heard it. I've never heard it.
I did not go whine to anybody about it. I promise you.
nor have I heard a woman complain to me personally or professionally, I don't understand. I got him the house, I got him the ring, I gave him the car, I pay for everything, and he still won't have sex with me. I don't understand what more I have to do. Like, I'm in this sexless marriage, I pay for everything, I feel like I'm just being taken. I've never heard a woman complain about that, you know?
Yeah.
So it does seem like the transaction between men and women does tend to fall along gendered lines,
Yeah.
um, where men are concerned about being exploited in their resource provision, and women are concerned about being exploited in their sexual opportunity. I think the reason why women enthusiastically get into relationships with players and why men often get into relationships with gold diggers or sugar babies. I did a conversation with a guy yesterday who had fallen in love with his sugar baby
They
escort
do.
girlfriend
They
all
do.
the time.
The guys all the time go, I think she really likes me. She's really into me. Or the guys with the hooker even going, she was having multiple orgasms and really enjoying it. I think I must really be good. She's really, yeah. They, and I love how you talk about we all lie. We all lie and present false, information about ourselves and our experience.
This might be a question that's answered a bit later in the book. I do a chapter, I think it was number 10, called "You Can't Have Any Relationship with Anyone. You can only have certain relationships with certain people." And I think the problem that a lot of people make is they just assume that the person that they're most attracted to can and will give them the relationship that they would prefer to have with them.
Yeah.
So what people do is they try their hardest to secure their most attractive option and then assume or try to fit them in the relationship structure that they would prefer. And that could be a terrible fit. Like, I think
That
women
that's
like
that's how
players
I made a
because,
living, for years as a marriage therapist, because we all seem to do that.
yeah, until you learn not to. And I think one of the suggestions I make in that chapter is to try to fit the person, try to fit the relationship to the person and not the person to the relationship.
Yeah.
A lot of people go to the dating apps or the marketplace and they are looking for a husband or they're looking for a girlfriend. And it's like, yeah. And what does that have to do with me? Like, you already have a decision about what you want me to do before you even met me. How do you know I can do that, let alone I
Right.
want to do that? But when people don't disabuse themselves of that priority, they then try to take the people that they're most attracted to and fit them into the confines of their preferred relationship structure, which they don't usually communicate to the other person and may not even be fully aware of themselves. And so
Yeah.
that's why I talk about the Procrustean bed of relationship structures, where it's
Oh,
like,
I haven't gotten to that term yet.
do you know where that comes from, Rob? The story of Procrustes?
Tell me. And then as soon
Um,
as you tell me, we're going to open this up to the guys to ask you questions.
sure. Procrustes, it was a mythological innkeeper, and he would brag that all of his beds were a perfect fit for his guests. And of course they were, because if they were too short, he would stretch them on a rack until they fit. And if they were too long, he'd chop off their legs until they fit. So everyone fit perfectly. And that's what happens when you have the relationship structure first, and then you meet the
Yeah.
individual, is you're going to have to stretch the guy, or you're going to have to chop off his legs to get him to fit. And that's why I suggest that that's a red flag, especially for men, because women tend to have more concrete ideas about what they want in a relationship than men do. And if men aren't, if they're not executing their plan, they're probably a part of somebody else's plan, which means that over time, that woman, through all kinds of different methods that may not even be fully conscious to herself, is probably going to either stretch him out or chop off his legs to get him to fit in her preferred relationship structure. And
No,
then
women
she
do
might not
that to
even be
men.
attracted to the guy at that point. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the other
She
real
turns him into the
liability.
guy that she turns him into the guy she doesn't want to be with anymore. Yeah,
Ex-
that never.
yeah,
So
that can happen.
I'll just say this real quick because this does happen a lot. I agree 100% with you. I see it happening with men, especially pretty successful men that have focused on their career. They get often late 30s or in their 40s, and then they say, Robert, I want to date. And I say, why? Well, I want to start a family. I want to meet the woman who's going to be the mother of my children. And I'll go, well, that's going to cause you to suffer. And they go, why? Because getting married is going to make me suffer. I say, yeah, but that's not why. Oh, because having kids is going to make me suffer. And I say, yeah, but that's not why. Why is because you're attached to this specific outcome. Like I said, you're trying to, every woman you date, you're going to have to quickly say, does she fit in the size bed that I'm looking for? And if she doesn't, you might bail on her way too soon because she might be an amazing human being that will bless your life in some really great ways, but it doesn't fit your preconceived ideas. And the other is they'll take women that don't fit in that bed and try to get them to fit into being the mother of their children. And so we ignore a lot of stuff and try to cram people into beds that don't fit them, or we kick them out of the bed before we even get a chance to know them and find out that, hey, this is really a cool person that would bless my life if I gave him a chance. So
Sure.
I agree that going into those preconceived ideas is problematic.
So the unbreakable rule is when women disrespect the men that they're in long-term relationships, I say to women, that's the one thing they absolutely cannot do. And obviously, it's much better to deal with this problem when it's small. If this is a long-standing intractable problem, there's going to be a big, difficult extinction burst for you to deal with. But let's talk about this. Most forms of disrespect can be starved by not giving them attention. Obviously, if something is too flagrant or aggressive, it needs to be addressed. But in the vast majority of cases, the best way to starve out a behavior that you want to see disappear is almost to pretend like you didn't even see it. You don't want to punish women by like getting angry or issuing ultimatums, because unfortunately, a lot of emotion is reinforcing for women. The best way to extinguish a behavior is almost to like look bored with it. They call that the non-reinforcing neutral response when they're training animals like orcas for SeaWorld. And it's almost like it didn't even register as disrespect, because when a woman disrespects, she does it intentionally. She's trying to provoke a certain emotional response. And when she learns that she was unsuccessful in doing so, she might try once or twice again, but then she's going to give up because it's not working. She might try some other way to provoke you, and then you'll have to be prepared for that. But few people are so stubborn and, I guess, so stubborn that they're going to persist in a behavior that is shown to be ineffective. So the other opportunity is to always be willing to leave the relationship. One thing that I say is that I'm like the anti-cult. Cults are really easy to get in and really hard to get out of. I'm really hard to get in and very fucking easy to get out of. It's like it's not even that the door is locked. There is no fucking door. It's like on some level, the women that I'm in relationships with, they should feel like they're high up on like a platform with no guardrail around it, which is going to make them a little bit uneasy, and it's going to make them more aware of their steps. They're not going to be doing anything foolish up there. They're going to be paying attention because there's a little bit of danger to that situation. So if the neutral responses don't work, then your ability to take yourself out of the relationship is your point of greatest leverage. And you have to be careful with that, though, because sometimes men and women are subject to saying whatever they need to say in order to keep a relationship that does provide value to them. And once that kind of crisis has been averted, they can resume their previous behavior. But sometimes, people can be helped to know that certain behaviors are degrading your ability to enthusiastically remain in a relationship. So I think those are two practical things that you could do: the non-reinforcing response and just the willingness to leave.
I love that. I talk with guys about what I call the second date rule. And that if a woman does anything during the lifespan of a relationship, that if she'd done it on the second date, there would not be a third. You should not be tolerating it in a long-term
that's
relationship.
That's a good
Anything
one.
you wouldn't tolerate second date, don't tolerate long-term. And as you said, when I went to dog obedience school, I quickly learned, well, don't scold a dog for bad behavior. Ignore it. Ignore it. Because animals, including us humans, respond to two reinforcers, food and attention. And I talk about guys giving the dog a treat for pissing on the carpet. So if every time my dog pissed on the carpet, I gave it a liver snap, it'd keep pissing on the carpet. If every time my woman disrespected me or did something I don't like, and I responded and paid attention to it, it's reinforcing the behavior. And people do what gets reinforced. So I love that. Just
well said.
I heard one person just say, the best way to respond to a woman when she's doing things you don't like is to say nothing, be very quiet, but look very happy. because women can't stand a quiet, happy man. I thought I like that.
You know that women aren't as forgiving to a man who hasn't gotten certain things figured out. So, just practically speaking, if you haven't figured out anger, if you haven't figured out success, if you haven't figured out self esteem, you're probably not dealing with a woman yet. So, that said, a lot of self esteem is rooted in self efficacy, which is kind of the belief that you can do the thing. And how can you authentically believe that you can do the thing when you haven't done it yet? And so that becomes kind of like this chicken and the egg thing. Like, I need the job for the experience, but I need to have experience to get the job, right? So sometimes you kind of have to fake it before until you make it. Certainly with respect to confidence, sometimes you have to act as if you were confident, act as if you were successful, or at least that you deserve the success that you hope to achieve. I think that's really important. I do think they're also interrelated. Like, as you become more have more fulfilling relationships with women, it will probably improve your self-esteem, which will help you to have more fulfilling relationships with women. So these things don't exist in vacuums. I think for men, they're highly interrelated. Like, depression is very overdiagnosed in America and in other parts of the developed world as well. Now, it could be true that you are a person is clinically depressed, but it could also be that the point that this person is lonely, this person is unhealthy physically, isn't exercising, this person is isolated, this person is not challenged or stimulated intellectually, this person is at the bottom of a social or status hierarchy. And it could be that one of the best things that you could do is to make money, learn how to get laid, take care of your physical health, start looking better naked. Like, these things sound very superficial, but they're deeply connected to mental health and well-being. Like, it's very hard to feel good inside of yourself when your body is full of crap, when you haven't been moving it and you put a lot of booze or drugs or fatty foods inside of it. Like, you're going to feel crummy. It's very difficult to feel that you are a person of value if no one around you is acknowledging that value. To think that we can do without that kind of validation or acknowledgement or those relationships is to live as either a beast or a god, which most people and most men cannot. So I think that you can start by solving some of the superficial material problems. Like, think about your body, think about your status, think about your income, think about your look. And sometimes that can help you feel better about yourself, which can redound to more positive results in other areas of your life.
I know the guys have heard me talk. I got a nutrition coach about 3 months ago and started tracking macros and now I'm working out more regularly and I'm as lean as I've been in 25 years. And I
Right
look
on,
in the
man.
mirror and I like that. It doesn't make me feel like a better person, but yeah, I like it. And so that gets generalized to other things I'll put the same kind of effort and mastery into because I know I'll like that as well. And then those things all, they're bricks that we just build, who we are.
It helps with flow state, but it also is a great emotional experience to be able to execute your competence and to see how that benefits other people. It's a great feeling.
And it is amazingly attractive to the feminine. It's just a masterful man. And women I found will go to the bank on a man's potential, but they won't stick around forever just on
It's
his
true.
potential.
I do talk about later in the
They'll
book
marry
how,
they'll marry pre-med students because there's potential there.
sure,
But
pre-med
he's got to live
is
up to
pretty
it.
far down the road already.
Yeah.
But I do talk about how one of the best ways for a man to increase his attractiveness to women is to be visibly competent. And it's never been easier in the history of the world to do that with social media. Like, if you're very good at something, like, make sure that people know about it. And especially with the internet and the algorithms, those platforms will eventually put your stuff in front of the people who are most disposed to thinking that it's really cool. And, even if it's very interesting just to other men, that's of interest to women because women want the men that other men respect and look up to.
100%.
It's under most circumstances, men should not even entertain the idea of long-term relationships or marriage until they're at least 35. And I think that's because it can take that long for a man to develop himself, to become a fully grown man, to have some level of success and achievement in the world, to know who he is and what works for him and what doesn't work for him, what he wants and what he doesn't want, to have that kind of accurate self-knowledge, which is really conducive to appropriate selection when it comes to women and relationships. And that it's going to be it's going to be very hard, because those 16-year-old boys are probably going after 16-year-old girls, as is appropriate. And those 16-year-old, well, I guess we can't say that, but let's say 18-year-old girls are going to be targeted by men of all ages. And as soon as both genders come into their majority, the men are just going to be outclassed by the young women in terms of their value proposition. And young men, despite their potential, despite whatever virtue or good heart that they have, they might often be passed over. They might be passed over by women. They might be passed over by other men for professional opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. It can take a very long time to become a man worth being. And so to be patient with that. I also believe that one of the best ways to have a satisfying relationship with a woman is to force her to choose you. A lot of guys, myself included, when they were younger, they saw the pretty thing and like, I need to have that one. And often we pursue the women right out of our lives. One of the best strategies that I've developed later on in life is basically just catch and release. Catch and release, catch and release, which is kind of, it's fun for me. I like to do that anyway. And then every once in a while, one of the fishes will jump back into my boat. And that fish like really wants to be caught. And then I'll, maybe I'll throw it back a couple more times. But like the woman who has to work for the relationship, the woman who has to, who keeps jumping back into the boat, is not going to throw it away for a trifle. She's going to feel fortunate that she's there. She's going to be making an effort, and she is going to be more committed to the relationship than a woman who was won. Let me tell you, the young people these days, especially young women, they're so precocious. Like I look at teenagers and they look like they're in their 20s, they're late 20s sometimes. Like at least the women do. The guys still often look like I did when I was a teenager. And so you can really see the difference in sometimes emotional maturity, but also this generation of women have been raised with Instagram. And so they've like internalized the optic gaze of social media. And so they're kind of a force to be reckoned with. Some of them are really savvy with respect to the look and how to navigate these different digital hierarchies that can be intimidating for young men, I would think.
At times, I can't tell the 15-year-olds from the 25-year-olds from the 35-year-olds because they're all trying to look exactly the same. And in your book, I like to say that, across culture and all studies, the average age of women that men are most attracted to is 23. And the average age of men that women are most attracted to is 50. And because I work with a lot of guys, and they're like 30 or 35 going, I got to get my shit together because I got to get a young, hot girlfriend now because I'm about to move out of the window that they won't pick me. And I go, no, you're wrong. The older I get, the younger the women are that are hitting on me. And my wife still daily points out very young women who are trying for my attention because of the value, I guess, I project. So
that's also good. If you should remain attractive to many women, even if you are monogamously committed to one.
I agree. And I completely agree because it is good for my wife to know, number one, she's married to a special man. And number two, I have lots of options.
Totally.
It's good for her to know that. It's good for her to know that. And she does take that seriously. She does take it seriously in a good way, very positive way.
And I'm sure you're not rubbing it in her face either. So a little bit of that jealousy and competition is a very powerful spice, but too much and it overpowers the food.
Yeah. Jealousy is a powerful aphrodisiac. My wife even tells me that. She goes, I get jealous, but it really turns me on. So why would I want that to go away?
On some level, you can't stop doing the things that initially worked on your woman, ever. And oftentimes men are very complicit in the dead bedrooms that they can end up in their long-term monogamous relationships. One way to deal with that tension is to make sure that you're not an entirely known entity, which means that you retain your independence, and she doesn't always know where you are. She doesn't always know what you're doing there. Even if you're not doing anything that you shouldn't be doing, she needs to wonder about what you're doing and with whom, which also means that you have to leave. Like if you're cohabitating, you should get out of the house a lot or be traveling a lot. If you're not cohabitating, don't see each other every day. Don't even communicate every day. You want there to be something unknown so that when you come together, there's a reason to reunite. Like too many men, they listen to, I mean, women want transparency, but they also don't want it. Like I know some women who, because of their desires to resolve their insecurities and their anxieties, wish I was made out of glass and they could just see every little thought and every emotion that was stirring in my heart. But if they were actually successful, then they would probably lose interest in me. I think you can think of it like this. People might spend weeks or months trying to noodle out the answer to a riddle, but once they realize what the answer is, they never think about it again for the rest of their lives. So it's like what is not yet known or not yet won completely or not yet entirely secure that creates the necessity and it cultivates curiosity, it stimulates interest, and that inflames desire. Okay, so that's part of it. You can also you have to be concerned about too few negative interactions. So this is interesting. Gottman talked about how for a relationship to be sustainable, there needs to be at least 5 positive interactions for every 1 negative. Okay, and that's a problem for most relationships. Most relationships are too negative, and that's why they're falling apart. But what he also found is that some relationships can be too positive, and that if there's more than 13 positive interactions for every 1 negative, it's almost like too boring. So don't treat your girl with like kid gloves. Make sure that every once in a while she's a little challenged, or that she's teased, or that she's you say no to her, or and that I think creates a little bit of that emotional ups and downs that can keep women engaged in relationships.
Love all of that. Is this all just great advice? For those of you who aren't familiar, and I don't know your thoughts on the book, but I love Esther Perel's Dating in Captivity. I remember when I listened to that the first time, I thought, fuck, I wish I'd written that book. And
Esther's great. I'd love to talk to her. I haven't read that
I
one.
would
I've
too.
read State of the Affairs. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you've not talked to her
Uh,
yet?
no, she's on my wish list to have come talk to us. So if I get connected with her, I'll connect you guys as well.
Oh, I think you'd be
Yeah.
a great fit for each other. I mean, maybe it's just a logistical thing.
Yeah, we got to work out the value exchange here, between her and I. But she's maybe a little more famous than me. But yeah, the premise of mating in captivity is basically too much intimacy, i.e., being known by the other person. Predictability tends to kill sexual passion, and it's true. And even though trust is important, especially for women in a relationship, you can almost be too trusting and too safe, and they lose that desire.
I do talk about that in the book. One chapter is about maintaining relationships and navigating the 3 crises that most relationships pass through. And one of them I call the doldrums, which is the diminution of sexual intimacy and passion. And one of the solutions I offer is to act as if you're having an affair. Even if you don't actually commit infidelity, everything that goes around having an affair is good for increasing passion and interest. The kind of secrecy, the spontaneity, the lack of pressure
The
for sex.
losing weight, wearing better clothes, stuff like
Totally.
that.
Like you can do
Yeah.
all of that and not cheat on your partner. It's everything that comes with the infidelity that is useful for inflaming desire. Now I've shifted to having criteria lists for the type of relationship that I want. And I approach selection as if I were hiring at a corporation. I often talk about on the channel that men are the CEO. We're hiring the women because we are in the position to extend an offer to them, whether that's just asking them out on a date or getting down on one knee. Like we give the offer. It's never the other way around. We give and the women either accept or not. So we're in a position to take them on, to hire them. And so what do companies do before they do that? They don't just hire somebody because it would be nice to have them around. Like hiring anybody is going to be an often not inconsiderable expense. So that person needs to justify that headcount. And so before they even start interviewing people, they define the position. Okay, what do we actually need a person to do? And based on what we need this person to do, let's reverse engineer the plausible attributes, skills, experiences that we can reasonably expect to be associated with discharging these responsibilities. And then we can start to interview people. And to my mind, it's actually useful to have a few different open positions. And that will, I think, help prevent men from just trying to force the woman that they're most attracted to into, I want her to be the mother of my child, which may not be appropriate. So in the course of the interview, as you get to know somebody, the idea is to like covertly evaluate them to see like which of the criteria sets would they be a best fit for, and then slot them into that position, rather than to make the decision about where they belong before you've even talked to them.
I like this a lot because, I teach go as slowly as possible to find out as quickly as possible what a woman's nature is and how she fits into your great life, which I think goes back to a lot that Orion teaches, and at least I'm seeing in the book, is that the value proposition is I got a great life. I'm an amazing catch. And my tendency getting in relationships, I meet a woman, well, I like a lot of these traits about her, but these other traits show up. And I keep going, why is that? And then I try to fix them and get her back to good because I like all these other traits that she has. And guys ask all the wrong question. Why does she do that? How come she does that? It's the wrong question. The wrong question is, what does this tell me about her nature? When she does that, what does that tell me about her? And does that fit into my great life? And if you don't already perceive that you have a great life, most men are trying to figure out, how do I fit into the woman's life? How do I make her happy? How do I make her happy enough that she wants to have me around? But you're the decider, you're the picker. And I like that. You have a good idea how that she's going to be the icing on top of the great cake that you've already created for yourself.
And I think building the great cake is really helpful for discerning women. When I didn't have much going on, I had very low standards with respect to women. It was like she wanted me and she had a pulse kind of a thing. But now that I've built something and I feel like I have something of value, something that I could lose, I'm much more discerning about who I bring into my life.
Yeah. You're in Dr. Sean T. Smith's work go really well together. His Gatekeeper book, I love,
Yeah, he's great. I love his stuff.
Never choose romance over your purpose, over your direction in life. I love Sean. He's a great guy. I've hung out in his house with his wife and kid and dog, and he's met my wife. She's met him. I love him. Okay. We got to wrap it up in terms of questions. I know there's still hands up. We always run out of time before we run out of questions, but you know what?
Guys.
That creates a little bit of emotional tension. We won't apologize. We'll just go, yeah, that's the whole idea. Leave them wanting more. Leave them in a state of tension.